Right, so could a turnaround in our electricity crisis be good news for the ANC at the polls next year? Tomorrow, the IEC will officially launch the 2024 national and provincial elections, which should give us a better idea of roughly when those elections will actually be held. Recently, the Brenthurst Foundation released a survey among 1,500 registered voters about the next election. The sample shows that the ANC could be in danger of its support dropping to around 40% and seriously at risk of losing control over Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. Well, I'm joined now by Ray Hartley. He's a research director of the Brenthurst Foundation. He joins us from Lilongwe in Malawi. Ray, thanks for joining us. First of all, a little bit more about the survey. 1,500 people who are registered voters. So these are people who vote. When did you conduct this and how did you conduct it? Was it face-to-face? Was it telephone? Was it a written form?
Yeah, it was, thank you very much, Sally. It was conducted in October, so this month, and it was 1,500 people that were interviewed by telephone. So it's a 15-minute survey, so it's got quite a lot of detail and we get quite a lot of information out of it.
Yeah, and it's quite recent as well. So it was done this month when I think this month it's been relatively easier in terms of load shedding. But just before we dive into that, what did you find in terms of what these voters were saying in terms of their national support for the ANC, the DA and the EFF?
Yeah, I think there's some quite dramatic shifts there. So the ANC, we did a similar survey a year ago and they were at 48%. So they've declined to 41%, which is quite a massive drop. And I think the major beneficiaries have been the EFF, which has risen from 11 to 17%, and the multi-party charter, which is a new formation, but we added up the votes of the constituent parties from a year ago and compared that with now, and they were up 2%. So there is quite a shift happening there in voting.
So obviously the DA is the second most popular party in the country. So you're not looking specifically at the DA, you're looking at the DA as part of that multi-party coalition. So what percentage of the vote would they get according to your survey participants?
So we had the DA at 23% of the vote.
Okay.
So right. The EFF at 17%, but yeah, rising quite fast.
Yeah, so we see the EFF is gaining traction and the ANC losing traction according to the survey. And of course, other surveys have been done which show a similar thing. Talk to me quickly about the provinces. What is the picture in the provinces? Are things shifting there as well?
Yeah, quite interesting from the provinces is that the multi-party charter and the ANC are neck and neck at 37% in Gauteng, and the EFF is at 18%, so a little bit stronger than its national figure. So somewhere in there is going to be a coalition that's going to govern Gauteng. It's extremely likely, and of course, that could be an ANC-EFF coalition, or perhaps the MPC or some of its parties might join up with the EFF. Never say never in politics, although never has been said on that. So yeah, it's going to be quite an uneasy coalition, I think, is the conclusion, one way or the other.
What about other provinces that are looking really on the edge? I mean, we know that the Western Cape just seems to comfortably be the domain of the Democratic Alliance. What about other provinces? Is the ANC in any danger in any others?
Yeah, I think the biggest danger to the ANC actually is in KwaZulu-Natal, and our survey actually backs up what's been happening in the by-elections there. So the ANC's had a pretty torrid time, losing a lot of seats in by-elections in previous strongholds, particularly to the IFP. And the multi-party charter at 46%, and more than half of that 27% is the IFP, and the ANC is down to 32% in KwaZulu-Natal. So I think the after effects of the rioting that took place more than a year ago, and of course the flooding and the real failure really of government to properly rebuild infrastructure that was severely damaged during the flooding has just taken its toll.
Now, in terms of why the ANC has lost support, how big a factor is the electricity crisis?
I think it's a big factor. A year ago when we did the survey, they had 48%. And I think if you remember back to a year ago, we were just into the second month of consistent daily load shedding, so to speak. And now this survey that we've done this October is after a year of almost consistent load shedding. So I think that's played into it. It's speculative, and if I were to speculate, I would say that also you've got to look at the rise in the EFF and the decline in the ANC and say what's happening there. So I think a lot of ANC voters that identified perhaps with Ace Makashule and the RET faction in the ANC have jumped ship because Ace is out and the RET faction is very much, been put back in its box, so to speak, by Ramaphosa's grouping. So those people, I think, have left for the EFF. And I think also the EFF has been the most vigorously active of the parties. They used their birthday celebration to great effect. They mounted a sort of mini electoral campaign, really, across the country with posters and meetings and so on, culminating in the massive event at FNB Stadium.
With a concert-like stage event. I have to ask you, because we're seeing that load shedding is easing, and we've heard twice now from the electricity minister saying we're turning the corner, things are getting better. We know that Kusile's, one of the units, is back online, and he seems more and more upbeat. We know there's still some way to go, but how big of a swing factor could getting out of the electricity crisis be for the ANC, bearing in mind that the elections are probably going to happen between sort of May and August next year?
Yeah, I think it could be a swing factor if they sustain this and they manage to keep the lights on through to then. They could actually benefit from it. I think the real problem for them is that part of the reason that the lights are on is not only the supply side, but also the demand side, because demand has shrunk, because the damage has been done to a lot of small businesses in the country and to industry and to retail. So there have been a lot of closures. So declining demand, especially industrial and retail demand, is not good for the party because it means that they're further away from solving the jobs problems that load shedding has caused. So, they needed to come back, but to be consistently back enough for business to start reinvesting and expanding. And I'm not sure if the horizon is long enough for that.
All right. Thank you so much. Fascinating research. Ray Hartley, Research Director of the Brenthurst Foundation, coming to us live from Lilongwe in Malawi.